1. So this is my first time sharing this online. I've been holding back from saying much, but I felt this was the time to do it. Keep in mind I moved out of North Carolina to New York near the end of 2022. This happened around November of 2021 in Garner, North Carolina. North Carolina being how it is when it comes to weather, it was a fairly warm night. I went to the neighborhood soccer field to go stargazing and look at the full moon. The sky was clear and the moon was bright. It lit the field up nicely. After I set up my telescope, 20 minutes passed by with my back turned towards the neighborhood. I see a light dance to my left, so I turn around. A guard is doing their routine patrol and checking for intruders. Hello. So I think nothing of it and turn my attention back to the stars. Then I heard a noise that didn't sound human or like an animal. A deep, guttural sound came from far behind me, and I turned to look again. It was the guard. It didn't feel right at all, and I turned back to start picking up my stuff. Then I hear footsteps getting closer, and the light was gone. "What a wonderful night, isn't it?" a voice asked. I turned to respond, but I noticed something off. The figure stood straight like a soldier in the military, feet together and arms to his side. "It is," was all I could muster out, then continued gathering my telescope and bag. "What's your name?" the guard asked. The way he asked was unsettling. It sounded layered, as if there was another voice speaking along with his. Curious, yet menacing. "My name is Jackson," was all I responded, with giving a fake name. I turned to face him, and then I noticed why it seemed off. The figure was wearing a guard's uniform, but it looked worn and tattered. His skin was black as a void, and I tried to look at his face with the moonlight, but there was nothing. There was nothing but a smile, a big, menacing smile. "Nice to meet you, Jackson. My name is Mike," he said as he tilted his head to the side, revealing that there were no other features but that insidious smile. I began walking towards the neighborhood, but when I walked past him, my spine felt like it was turning into ice. What followed made me terrified, and it was a smell of sulfur. "Have a wonderful night, Jackson," was the last thing I heard, and the act was slipping. The voice sounded more inhuman, and even when I gave him a fake smile, it made it worse. I walked far enough away to where I can see the field and have a good distance away to see if he would return out from there. He never did. So a few months later, it was February. I was on a nightly walk, and I stopped by the neighborhood office to visit the cat that resided there. While I was petting and playing with the little guy, a night guard stopped by to check on me to see if I was all right. I told him I was, and who I was visiting as the cat was in my lap. Before he stepped away, I asked him if there was anyone named Mike that worked there back in November. He asked why, and I explained what had happened around that time. Then he promptly went to go find me an answer. After a few more minutes, he came back out and looked confused. There was no one named Mike that worked there around that time in November, and he looked just as confused as I did. Maybe a bit more horrified considering that was his next area to check. We talked a bit more about how we both didn't like to mess with the paranormal, witchcraft, anything of the sort. Then we parted ways, leaving me more unnerved than I was prior. To this day, that night still freaks me out, sending bad chills down my spine whenever I remember the disturbing and sinister smile that pierced through the void that was its face. 2. I have a ghost story that still haunts me to this day. I was in my senior year of high school around 2012, and I stayed up a bit too late watching Doctor Who. I see no problems there. Realizing it was late, I went to go to bed, and in an effort to get comfortable, I rolled over in my bed. when I saw what looked like the silhouette of a person. It was wearing a mask and holding a kitchen knife, both of which weren't silhouetted. The mask looked like the evil cousin of the typical harpy and sad theater masks. But this one had angry eyes with a large smile. I looked at this thing for what felt like ages, trying to make out what it could be in the dark. Sometimes a pile of clothes looks creepy in the dark. Maybe this was like that. I held my gaze on it as I reached for my lamp, only to see it disappear as I turned on the light. There was just an empty wall, nothing I could have mistaken it for. I told myself, out of sight, out of mind, and decided I would close my eyes, turn off the lights, and throw the covers over myself. I still needed to try and sleep. That's when I felt something, thin and blunt, pressing into the middle of my back, right where your brow would meet your spine. I pressed harder and harder, not letting up until I couldn't press any harder. My back was arched from the pressure, and I was frozen in fear. People tell me it could have been sleep paralysis, however, I have no history of it, and it was also before I ever fell asleep. Usually sleep paralysis happens as you wake up, not as you get into bed. Eventually, the pressure let up, and I was able to move again. I immediately got up, turned on the light, and started looking around to see if one of my brothers had pranked me. Both were dead asleep. My parents were dead asleep. There was no sign of anything besides an insane knot in the center of my back. After that, I slept with my closet light on every night, to shine a light on that spot. 2-ish months later, that mask showed its face at the end of my dream, only for me to wake up to the sound of my dad trying to put out a fire in our attic above my room. Our pipes were frozen, and he had a space heater in the attic trying to warm the pipes. To be safe, he was checking on the space heater every 5 minutes. The fireman said the space heater had malfunctioned and proceeded to catch itself and everything around it on fire. Within the 5 minutes my dad was gone, it was too big to be put out. All of it had happened immediately above where I saw that masked shadow person. I've never known how to explain all of this, but after we rebuilt the house, I never saw it again. I've had other supernatural experiences, but they were all harmless. This one was my first and most intense one of them all. 2. During my teenage years, I had multiple experiences in the 2 house shares I lived in during university. The first house was a standard terraced property that had a basement. Obviously, we explored the basement area the first day we moved in, where we found this matchstick model of the house that had been put together, as well as old newspaper clippings from the 1970s. We thought nothing of this, but the activity just boomed. Shadow figures. The house layout meant you walked in and had 2 rooms off the corridor. As you went down the corridor, there was a kitchen, and through the kitchen was the living room. You could see the living room from the front door. We all saw figures move into that living room all the time. Basement. The door would unlock and open itself, and the light would switch itself on. Drawers opening. All our rooms locked. My housemate in the room downstairs would come home to find all of her drawers open on a regular basis. All of the kitchen cabinets would randomly open as well. Upstairs hallway. 3 of us had rooms upstairs. We would hear loud footsteps and people running around almost every single night. We always thought it was each other until, after a few months, we asked each other and realized it was none of us. Banging. Randomly, something would bang my radiator on the other side of the room so loud it would wake me up. The second year, our group stayed together, but those experiences were enough. So we got out of that house and moved to another, thinking it would be better. It wasn't. It got worse. Upstairs hallway. Footsteps, just like before. Upstairs bathroom. One night I was on the toilet and hear someone try the locked handle and giggling. I shouted out thinking it was my housemates playing a prank, but the handle rattled louder and more aggressively. I shot up and opened the door. It was pitch black and everyone was in bed, fast asleep. My bedroom. Voices and objects falling. I had a shelf in my bedroom, and in the night things would fall off randomly. I checked the fittings, and this thing was dead level. Even if you slammed the doors and windows, the items didn't budge. This just kept happening. Then one night, in bed, I'm just falling asleep and hear the sound of a very audible exhale in my ear. So loud I feel the breath. I quickly roll over and see this human-like figure right by my bed, which quickly disappeared. Housemates hear voices. My housemates downstairs used to hear chatting in the living room at night. They would think it was us and text everyone. It never was. We would all either be out or in bed asleep. Shadows. We would see shadows dart around the living room. One night we were all watching TV together and we all saw this figure dart down the hallway towards the garden. I couldn't sit or stand in that room without my back basically being against the wall. Taps. The taps in the downstairs bathroom, upstairs bathroom, and kitchen would just turn on and start randomly. I finally moved out in my 3rd year to another property and everything stopped. A few of our group had placement years, etc., so we split up. One of my housemates decided to stay in that house and new people moved in with her. I never went to visit. The house gave me the creeps. The man who took my room had the exact same experiences as me. Everyone else also had their own. I often think about the people who lived in them since, and whether they had the same experiences. 4. This isn't a news story, but it happened sort of recently. So I'll begin by giving some background on myself, since I believe it could have something to do with the incident. I have always had a powerful sort of intuition. Not psychic or clairvoyant, but maybe something close. I can just sense things before learning the facts or the truth. I've had strange experiences my whole life. When I was younger, I would get this rush of euphoria, for lack of a better word. Love, out of nowhere, and for no reason. It was always very intense and lasted for several minutes, but it was a good experience. It felt like I was wrapped in the embrace of something powerful. I felt complete euphoria, happiness, and a sort of energy that was extremely powerful. When this would happen, it was like the world around me seemed brighter as well. Like there was some sort of light that was being emitted from within everything. Much like an aura, but even coming from inanimate objects. That's the best I can describe it. It felt as though there was a presence, but I can't be certain, as I never actually saw anyone or anything of note besides the increased brightness of the world around me. It was just weird, and these incidents have always stuck out in my mind. But for whatever reason, I haven't had a similar experience since I was a child. The last one I can remember was when I was in 1st grade. However, that was the most powerful one of all, and I remember it vividly. I've always just felt different in a way I can't quite describe. Not in a way that makes me special or anything. I don't want to come off as behaving that I'm somehow special or better. I've just noticed I think differently and have always been a very deep and philosophical person. Especially as I got older, but I had deep thoughts and opinions as a child too. This has remained with me my entire life, and I still feel this way now as an adult. I've always been a searcher, one who is constantly searching for the meanings behind life and how everything functions. So with this story, there was a sort of build-up to the actual event. It began as something simple but weird nonetheless. I noticed that when I was laying in bed, it felt like my bed was slightly shaking. At first, I just dismissed it as being in my head, but as time went on, I became more and more certain that it was actually happening. I started paying more attention to it as a result. After a while, I began to feel something pressing on my back from within my mattress. I know it sounds crazy. That's what it felt like. I tried my damnedest to ignore it and tell myself I was imagining it. But it continued regardless. Night after night, I felt what seemed like arms and hands lightly pushing up from inside my mattress on my back. I tried laying completely still and focused on something in my room, so I could see whether or not I was actually being pushed upwards. To my surprise, I was. I could actually see my view of the item changing as I was pushed slightly upward. I was baffled. I had never been a believer or religious person. I always found a logical explanation or dismissed things as being my imagination, but this was different. I couldn't dismiss this as just my imagination, and I was certain I could feel and see myself move. It was real. I chose to ignore it and hope it ended. I even began to wonder if I was losing my mind. During this time, I started having nightmares of being chased and shot, which were extremely vivid. I felt the emotions and fear like I was actually there. When shot, I felt pain and burning of a bullet ripping through my back. I even felt the heat of the bullet. I can remember the setting just as well as if I had actually spent time there. The place seemed very familiar, yet I can't place it. I only feel that I know this place somehow. I also experienced several events where I would wake up in sheer panic, consumed by fear, trapped in my room which was unusually dark. By dark I mean completely pitch black to where I literally couldn't see my way around my room. During these events, I would jump out of bed and frantically struggle to find my way to my door, just using my hands. I am beginning to feel very uncomfortable just talking about this part. I'm reminded of the fear and panic I felt, and it turns my stomach into a knot. It was one of the worst experiences in my life. I hope I never experience it again. I can remember finding my door and collapsing to my knees once I was out of the door into the hallway. It took me days to get feeling right again, and to get it out of my head enough to sleep. But I dreaded the nights for a long time. I still have to have a light in my room to this day. I'm over 40 years old. It's not something I'm proud to say, and it makes me feel weak. Now is the main event. So I remember that I had been experiencing the same shaking of my bed and pushing before falling asleep that night. I had fallen asleep for some time, but I'm not sure how long now. I have a tendency to wake up multiple times a night, and this night was no different. This is going to sound cliché, but I awoke at some time around 3 a.m. and was just laying in bed thinking. I'm not sure that the time has any bearing on this story, but I've wondered if it did. Perhaps the veil between our world and the world beyond is truly thinner at this time. I remember I was wide awake and was considering turning the TV on. That's when the pushing on my back started up. Only this time it was stronger than usual, and I thought I could feel individual fingers. At this point, I was kinda over the whole thing. I was beginning to get angry and frustrated. As a result, I started kinda pushing back and shifting my weight and using my arms. Due to this, it seemed to stop for a time. So I turned on the TV and started watching Adult Swim. But suddenly I felt something else. I felt like something had risen out of my mattress, because it was brushing past my arm as it came out. I was confused when I felt it, but not concerned, because I just assumed in the moment it was my blanket or something. Nothing was visible, just a sensation. Suddenly, it became clear what it was because I felt a hand grab my left forearm tightly. I knew it was a hand, because I could feel each finger as it clasped itself onto my arm. It wasn't cold or hot, it was just neutral. All I felt was the pressure. I immediately freaked out and rolled off the bed to the left, which was closest to my door. I remember my shock as my arm stayed firmly on the bed but was able to rotate in the grip of the hand as I rolled. Just like if someone grabbed your arm and hung on as you struggled and turned to free yourself. I can remember thinking this is all in your head for a moment, just before trying to pull my arm away. When I did try to pull my arm back, it remained stuck to the bed, and I could feel the grip tighten when I pulled. That's when my fight-or-flight response really kicked in, and I chose fight. I began to punch as hard as I could where I thought the hand or arm would be, and in the dark of my room only lit by my television, it felt as though I was hitting something. The sensation I felt with my first hit was strange, like punching squishy air. After a few solid hits, I felt its hold release and my arm was finally free. I immediately turned on my bedside lamp and looked at my bed to find nothing. Nothing at all. Just empty sheets. I still struggle to understand this event, and I still find ways to explain it to myself logically. I just want to brush it off as being something I imagined, but that's a lie. I know it wasn't just my imagination. It wasn't a dream either. And I know that deep down, I've always been a believer in science and the tangible. I've laughed in people's faces who told me to have faith. I've struggled with that my whole life. My motto has always been, if you can't prove it, it isn't real. Carl Sagan said it best when he said, "Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence." That is what I live my life by. But I can't explain this, nor can I provide any proof beyond just retelling the story, and that eats at me. When asked about my religious preferences, I always claimed agnostic. I had been that way since I was a very young age. I was around 4 or 5 years old when I decided I didn't believe in the church my family and I attended. It wasn't long after that I decided that I didn't believe in any of the organized religions. But it was after this event and one other that I began to find myself becoming more spiritual. I still don't belong to any church and never will. All of them are corrupt and very misleading anyway. I just feel more and more as I age that there is something more to this life than what we can see. I am still not certain what I believe, though. Just that I don't believe in the religions that exist today, or their God. I just hope that maybe one day I'll figure it out. I mean, regardless, I'll figure it out when I die. We all will, I suppose. 5. Hope everyone is doing well. The incident took place approximately 19 years ago. I was 16 when it happened, and I was living with my dad, just us. Fast forward 3 years, my dad and I were sitting in our freestanding garage smoking cigarettes and just shooting the breeze. We started exchanging stories, and he came at me with one I had no recollection of, and I mean zero. While he was telling me the story, I actually thought it was about someone else, because I honestly didn't have access to the memory at the time. The story, and Dad said, "Remember when I was sitting in the living room around 10 p.m. watching TV, and all of a sudden I started hearing screaming. I mean like screaming, top of your lungs type stuff. I jumped up off the couch as fast as I could, sprinted down the hall to your bedroom." "Wait, what?" I say. "I was the one screaming?" "Yeah," Dad said. "How do you not remember?" Was this like when I was really young or something?" "No, son, it was about 3 years ago." In my head, I'm thinking this kind of freaked me out, to be honest, because I had no idea what he was even talking about at this point. "Well, what happened?" "Well, I ran down the hall as fast as I could because I thought something was seriously wrong. The weirdest part was when I tried to open the door, I physically could not turn the knob no matter how hard I tried, like someone was holding it from the other side. After about 10 to 15 seconds, I was finally able to open the door. I went in and turned the light on, and you were sitting on your bed, leaning into the corner of your room, just screaming with a horrified look on your face. After a few seconds, you snapped out of it and realized it was just us and you were okay." I responded by saying, "What did I tell you happened? You said there were all these things in the room with you." It was at this point when the memory vividly came back to me and my eyes watered instantly. On my end of the story, I was sleeping and woke up to all these tall figures around my bed. I would say they were at least 6 feet tall, black robes with hoods pulled over their heads, and just blackness inside the hood. I don't recall seeing any distinct faces. They were literally shoulder to shoulder standing around my bed. Now, the way the room was laid out, my bed was in the opposite corner of the room as the door, so they lined up around 2 sides of the bed. I instantly stood up and backed into the corner of the room in my bed, and I realized there were more behind them. I would have to guess there were at least 20 in the room. The room was a 10-foot by 12-foot room. It felt like the room was completely full. I screamed for my dad to help me, and it felt like an eternity before the door opened. They did not touch me, but they gave off very bad vibes. Back to the doorknob. It was a standard doorknob, a cylinder shape that tapers in. The knob did not have any locking mechanism and was not faulty in any way. This has never before or since been a problem, not being able to open the door. But when my dad tried to that night, something, for some reason, caused him to be unable to turn it to open it for at least 10 seconds. That is the part that just doesn't sit right with me to this day. Debunk this, give insight, make fun of me, whatever. Have a good night, everyone. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 422. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you would like to support the channel, you can do that by signing up for my Patreon page. Even $1 a month, or more if you choose to, is super helpful. And if you'd like to buy the channel merchandise, that's on the Teespring store, which is also linked in the description. Okay. No more bits and bobs today, so let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: when it comes to having packages delivered, do you prefer that the person hand it straight to you, or do you like them just to put it somewhere safe so you can get to it later so they don't disturb you? Well, I understand and agree that there are certain advantages to having it just handed to you because it's safer. Usually with me, they're not sitting for long, and most of the drivers realize where they should put the packages these days. So it is more convenient for me because of the kind of schedule I'm on, as in I work through the night, sleep through the day, to have things just put in a safe place. But other answers are available, so let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And this one came from Paranormal Stories 420. Somewhat appropriately, this was Paranormal Stories 420. And the question is, what is your favorite discontinued snack? Stuff you can't find anymore. So today's answer comes from Rachel Lang. I don't think it's been discontinued, but as an American living in Germany, finding it here is impossible for me to find. I am not much of a sweet eater, but I do love the Cadbury cream Easter eggs. I do love one with a glass of cold milk, just slowly snacking on one. I truly miss them. I haven't enjoyed that delicious taste in years. That was my Easter treat every year. If you mean the little ones with the sweet sticky filling, they are very, very nice. The last time I got them was a box of different kinds. I'm not saying that to rub it in your face. Although you can get them from Amazon Germany. It'll cost you about €20 for a pack of 10. Not great prices, but they are available. If it's a once-a-year treat, it might be worth doing it. Thank you very much for your answer, and with that, I'm going to head off for now and resist the urge to buy some cream eggs. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.